a lot of people, I think, fall into this where they'll think, oh, I have this great idea, and it might be technologically feasible to build it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people will want to use it. And so I kind of went through a couple of different cycles of that, of, building something that I thought was cool that would be useful for me, but wasn't really that useful to other people. Where, it's easy to kind of get into this cycle of thinking, this happened to me a lot anyway, and I've seen it happen to other people, where you think, oh, if I just build this awesome thing, all these people will flock to it. But it's not really. You really have to be thinking about how you'll get people, to use it, or what's the need for this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yo, what's up? This is BOHO HOBO, and we welcome you all back to Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. The purpose of Bindlism is to unlock authentic perspective as we create a community of like-minded individuals who are living a self-sufficient lifestyle. A self-sufficient lifestyle is one in which a human being is activating their self-awareness to curate an authentic life that keeps them sustained mentally, emotionally, and physically in their adventure towards self-fulfillment. BOHO HOBO's mission is to support a community that fosters this culture. We will be interviewing a diverse group of people, including artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, and independent thinkers to make this happen. Please join us in this journey as we explore the world and broaden our horizons with discoveries of new perspective. Thank you to everyone who is taking the time to stop by on your journey to give us a listen. We hope you enjoy, and as always, explore endlessly. All right, we're live.
Very nice.
We're here on Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. John was recommended to us by Tom Dillon. He was on the podcast before in earlier episodes, back when we were doing this in the Coworks. But we're here today at the Gear Factory, and Tom was telling me that John is very familiar with technology, and that's what you do for full-time work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been interested in, tech, it's a pretty broad term, but especially just, as a young kid in the 90s, I was really into computers, and when my family got our first computer, I was on that all the time. So I was just into computers, and then that turned into wanting to start online businesses, and then eventually I started making iPhone apps and Apple Watch apps, and so wide variety of things related to tech. But I'm also just interested in new technologies and how they work and things like that.
He also said you were into economics as well.
Oh, yeah, a little
about,
bit.
Finance and
yeah,
stuff.
we could talk a little about that too, I guess. But mostly tech, I think. I don't know, kind of where they blend together. I know you're interested in like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and stuff like that. So for sure, that kind of stuff's really interesting to me.
Are you a developer?
I would say, yeah, I'm a software developer.
Is that all freelance?
No, I actually don't do any freelance. So I have I'm involved with a number of different businesses. The most software developer-y one is I make iPhone apps and Apple Watch apps. And in that capacity, it's just me, no employees, just me making some apps that I come up with. I come up with the ideas, release them in the App Store, see if people download them, email with the people who are using them and make them better over time. So that's not my main thing right now, but it's something I'm working on growing. And I've been doing that since about 2014 is when I first made my first iPhone app.
And you're using Swift, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yep. Swift. I never even learned Objective-C, which is what, everybody made Mac and iPhone apps on up until about 2014, I think, is when Swift was released. That's Apple's programming language. And it's really well designed, I think. I mean, I've used a number of languages, and if anybody out there is interested in getting into software development, Swift is, I think, very easy to get started compared to some other languages.
So just give me a rundown of the different types of languages.
Oh, I mean, well, there's so many different ones, but Swift is used for, Apple came up with it, but it can be used for all kinds of things, like even server side stuff or anything on, iPhones, Apple Watches, any of the Apple products like a Mac software. And then you've got for Android apps, Java, Kotlin. And so Java's been around forever, but that's what is used for Android apps. And then on the server side, like, if you're making some website or like an e-commerce site or anything, really any kind of website, there are a number of different technologies. So like PHP was a really big one back in like 2005, 2006, around there. I mean, plus or minus 5-10 years. But that's what that's like what Facebook was kind of started on. And then you've got Ruby on Rails. I mean, I don't know how interesting this is to your audience, but I got started in PHP and then got into Ruby on Rails, which is what Twitter was originally built on. That came out around like 2007, 2006. I mean, it started getting big around then. It was out a little bit before that.
Okay. So what originally led you to wanting to develop apps?
Well, I originally got into website development. And I say website, like, I mean, people might be familiar with HTML and CSS and just, what you see on a website, but then there's the whole idea of a web app. So like, and that's what all websites seem to be these days, but it used to be very static where, you'd have a web page and it would look a certain way, and then you'd edit that if you needed to make it different. And then things like, Facebook came along where, now what you see on the page changes, and it's a very dynamic experience for each person. Or even something as simple as an e-commerce site with a shopping cart, and you add things to your shopping cart. Well, now there's more than just a static page you're looking at. There's other stuff happening behind the scenes. And that was always interesting to me because it's a way to make software that's accessible to the world, basically. And so I was interested in that, both creatively and also just from a business standpoint. I wanted to have my own business of some kind. And I'm talking now, this was probably in like the mid 2000s.
Wow. How old are you?
33.
Okay. So you started getting into app development mid 2000s.
Mostly websites, web development. And so that was an interesting thing because, I mean, I had a lot of ideas, and a lot of people, I think, fall into this where they'll think, I have this great idea, and it might be technologically feasible to build it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people will want to use it. And so I kind of went through a couple of different cycles of that, of, building something that I thought was cool that would be useful for me, but wasn't really that useful to other people. Where, it's easy to kind of get into this cycle of thinking, this happened to me a lot anyway, and I've seen it happen to other people, where you think, if I just build this awesome thing, all these people will flock to it. But it's not really, you really have to be thinking about how you'll get people, to use it, or what's the need for this. So I built a number of different projects over the years, with varying degrees of traction. But I didn't really have a lot of success building just straight up web apps. And then I ended up getting into making a site. It was a site this was around 2010, a website about free samples. So it sounds really kind of
like music
silly.
Samples?
No, no, like free samples of shampoo and like consumer packaged goods. A lot of these companies will give away free product samples, and more so back then. I had a friend who was doing it that got me into it. But basically, I had this website. It was just a WordPress site, and someone would post the samples. I hired someone in the Philippines actually to post the samples every day. So she'd go around in forums and things and find what new samples people were talking about, write up a post on the website with a picture. And then there was an email list through Aweber at first, and then MailChimp. And so people would sign up for the email list. So it would look something like someone would Google free samples by mail, or free samples even, and then find the website. A thing would pop up, say, hey, do you want new samples every day? The person would put in an email address, and then that person would get an email every day. Here are the 5 new samples of the day. And so it sounds really kind of silly and like, who would want that? But that was a situation of kind of the opposite thing of what I was saying before, where it wasn't so much about the technology. I mean, it was just a simple WordPress site, but there were all these people who wanted free samples. So they would sign up for it. And that website made money off of Google Ads, AdSense. So like you can put display ads on your site, and Google handles all of that, and then just sends a deposit every month. And then also performance marketing, like CPA, affiliate marketing. So for example, it was around during, it must have been about 2010 or 2012 or 13, when Groupon was really big and Living Social. And they were spending a lot of money, so they would, pay like $1.50 every time. Like I'd have a form on my site, and every time someone put in an email address to sign up for Groupon, Groupon would pay like $1.50. So I would just, get a lot of people to sign up. So that was like kind of
So it was like affiliate marketing kind of?
Yeah, and that was the first website that I actually made that was like a business.
And that was just straight web page, right? No apps. And
it didn't have an app. I mean, it's like, well, because WordPress is technically in PHP, so it's kind of a web app like PHP that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I mean, you can just think of it as a website. It's like a blog. It's just a blog that posts free samples, and then there was an email list component, and it was pretty simple.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times with apps, it's the more simple you can make it, and user friendly it is, the easier it is to attract people. And it is kind of interesting to see how there's the convergence of economics and like social sciences with like human psychology paired with the technology, and how those two things really balance each other out. And a lot of times it's like if you're an app developer, you're just solely focused on the technology. And then if you're a social scientist, you don't think as much about technology. But if you could have that like way of building that communication between the two disciplines, I think that would be beautiful. Like we'd be more effective in making apps.
That's what I'm trying to do actually there's so much going on, obviously, with the way that these algorithms work on social networks, and just surfacing things that they think you will like keep you engaged and keep you interested, like YouTube's recommendation algorithm or Netflix's recommendation algorithm, to just get you to keep watching and watching. And so I think about things that control people and build habits that way, and I've thought about how can I use that kind of thing for good, to help people live better lives. And so I talked about the free sample site, but that's, that was kind of what got me started. And because of what you just said, I guess, I could switch to kind of, now I'm working on a number of different apps, but my main app is actually an app that helps people drink more water, which sounds kind of silly. Like a lot of people.
What's it called?
It's called P&C. PEE
okay.
and SEE. So I should have given you the whole spiel first, because normally I don't just tell people the name off the bat. I say, hey, do you ever feel like you don't drink enough water?
Give them the why.
Yeah,
why
right?
You would be
okay,
interested.
so basically, there are a lot of water reminder apps out there, and most of them you have to tell it how much water you drink. But that's really annoying, because like, are you drinking out of like a graduated cylinder? How are you measuring how much water you're drinking? And even if you know the size of your glass, do you really wait till it's all the way empty and then refill it? And it's really, maybe it's a hot day out, maybe you go for a run, maybe you go in a sauna. Just tracking how much water you drink doesn't seem like a really effective way to monitor how hydrated you are. So my idea was, instead of how about a water reminder app where you don't ever have to tell it how much water you drink, and instead you just tap one button every time you go to the bathroom, and if it's been a long time since you peed, it tells you to drink water. So that's why it's called P&C, like pee and see how hydrated you are. But it's also a play on, the grocery store. Remember the grocery store? P&C.
Wait, wasn't that Price Chopper? Or was
No,
that
there's
two different companies?
I think they might have both been owned by Penn Traffic, but it was like P ampersand C.
Yeah.
Like producers and consumers is what it stood for.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It just kind of sounded like that. And it's also kind of a catchy name. Sometimes it sounds like, it's some kind of weird fetish thing, I guess. But, like some people are like, what is this app? But there are a lot of people who really like it. I released it in 2016. People all around the world are always emailing me saying, hey, this really helped me, or hey, can you make this change, or making suggestions. And I really like that app because I feel like I'm making a meaningful difference in people's lives and helping them build habits that will help them improve their health over time.
Yeah, I definitely have to drink more water as well. So I'll probably download the app.
Okay.
Can I get it on Apple?
Like it's only so I don't
have
have an Android version, but it's an iPhone app and an Apple Watch app. And I'm really interested in going more after Apple Watch users with this app because right now about 30% of the regular users of the app use it on an Apple Watch, and it's really easy. I mean, you just tap in here and then you just, hit a log P button when you're walking to the bathroom. It takes like 2 seconds. And so I found that people really like it as an Apple Watch app. There are about a little over, I think, 100 million Apple Watches out there. So even if I find, 100,000 people, that's a tiny percentage of those. I mean, that if there probably are, at least a couple 100,000 people out there that would want to use this app who feel like they don't drink enough water.
So I'll log it every time I go to the bathroom then?
Yeah.
And
then,
then
you just tap a button.
Okay. So like the rate, I guess, of me going to the bathroom is determining like how much water I should drink. It
doesn't even make a recommendation of how much water you should drink. It just says, hey, it's been, 3 hours since you peed.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you want to think about drinking some water. And it does make you more aware of, like just your habits, and in times when you think, oh, wow, it's been, like 5 hours since I peed. I didn't even think about it. So there are people also who use it for medical reasons, to just track information to give to a doctor. And so I'm probably going to make a separate mode for the app that's not water reminder focused. That's just for those people, because that's a growing market. And I hear from a lot of people who use it for that. But I really want to make a lot of changes to the app this year and next year to just make it a lot better than it is now, because it's been out since 2016 and there are people who have used it every single day. It keeps track of your streak. And so there are people who have used it every single day for, 3-4 years almost. And so it's somewhat addictive now. I want to make it even better.
So your customers, they're once you got them onto it back like 4 years ago, they've been like pretty disciplined with it.
Some people, yeah. I mean, it's not for everyone. Obviously, a lot of people, drink enough water anyway, or think they do, and then other people, think it's too much reliance on like your phone. People are like, oh, I don't want to be, doing that on my phone every time I go to the bathroom. Like that seems crazy, but there are other people who love it. So it's obviously not for everyone. It's not like I think this is an app everyone should have. I just made it for the people who appreciate the idea and want to use it. And it seems like there are quite a few of those people out there.
And just getting into the science of it, like how many times on average should you be peeing?
Oh, I don't even know.
No?
I mean,
Okay.
it's just the idea of it is just that 3 hours seems like a pretty reasonable time if you haven't peed for a while. And then it also has quiet hours. So at night, it doesn't send any reminders while you're sleeping. But, I think there are ways to improve it. You can adjust that 3 hour setting to, 5 hours, or I have it set to 2 hours. But, yeah, I mean, I'd like to get more into the science of it, and the science of hydration, include things like that in the app. But, for now, it's like basically this simple water reminder with some other features too in it.
And I think that's the key too. You made it simple. Use a factor that was actually more able to be measured by the consumer themselves, as opposed to having like a health tracker of some sort. Because how would you really do that? I'm just thinking, because a lot of the big tech companies are trying to find ways of tracking our health, whether it's like our blood pressure, heart rate. And just from the brief amount of research I've done, it seems like they're having a lot of issues with like either fraud or like people abusing the health tracker to get like reward points or
the
something.
Insurance companies that will give you a Fitbit and then people put it on their dogs or something.
So there's like fraud. There's also just inaccuracy in it. The health tracker not working. And then just people not using it because they just forget about it. Like if they go on a run, they're like, I don't want to bring my phone. I don't want to bring this thing with me, kind of thing. So I don't know. I thought it was pretty ingenious.
I try to keep it simple. Yeah. And I mean, it's you mentioned people forgetting about it, and that's something I'm trying to always improve, is just how does the experience go where someone just forgot about it for a minute and then, okay, I forgot to log one, and then it's kind of like in the current state of the app, it's kind of like, oh, well, now I should just give up because it's all the data's messed up. But so I'm working on trying to improve that. But that's just one app, and the way I'm approaching it is it's a free app. There are no ads in the app. I really don't ever really want to make apps that have ads because I used to have that website that had ads, display ads, and I just don't like the experience for an app. And it's also just with all the tracking. I mean, now some of these companies are starting to cut back on the tracking, like Apple and Google are taking more of a stance to cut back on cross-site tracking, but I just don't really like it. So
Is that like targeted ads?
yeah,
based
like
off
when
of
you're,
where you go?
like if you're shopping for something on an e-commerce site and then you see an ad for that product on Instagram, it's like, okay, that's not a coincidence. And no, your phone's not listening to you. It's just like it's called a cookie, that tracks you. But instead it's a subscription model. So basically, 95% of people use the app for free and don't pay anything. And then about 5 or 6% pay for a subscription. It's a pretty cheap subscription that gives some extra features. So basically that's my approach with it. I want to try to just help as many people as possible stay hydrated with the app. And so a lot of people use it for free, and then some people pay for it either because they want the extra features or they just want to support development of the app.
So as in terms of like retaining your customers to want to keep using it, would you say that's the best way to approach the
for subscription
revenue structure?
I thought it made sense because there are people who get a lot of long-term value out of the app. So these people, people are using it for 2-3 years without ever missing a day. I figured, if they really get that much use out of it, that they probably wouldn't mind. I think a year is like $12 or $13 a year. It's like $1 a month. So, hopefully they're okay with paying that. Some people are really not into the whole idea of subscription apps and want, a paid upfront app. So there is an option. You can get a lifetime subscription for a one-time fee. But the app itself is free upfront. And then some people I think would want ads just to be able to get all the features, but I don't like that idea of having ads in the app. So
because then don't you have to have like your own personal time taken up too with trying to stay up to date with those ads?
I mean, you can use a service. You can use
okay.
like I was saying earlier, Google AdSense, which is now just Google Ads, I think. But you can basically have Google or someone else sell that space for you to the highest bidder, or based on someone's previous behavior, things like that. So I'm not as into that for the monetization of apps, but that's really one area I'm really trying to keep growing is PNC, the number one app.
So that would be your most successful app that you've made altogether?
It doesn't have the most downloads, but I think it has the most diehard users, and I think it has the most potential to where I could grow it a lot more. I haven't really put a lot of time into it. I just kind of work on it here and there.
It's funny how the side project end up
I mean, I guess
becoming the thing.
in spurts I've put time into it, but like I feel bad because I've been really stuck on this major rewrite of this section that basically, if you're using, let's say you're using the app for a year and then you lose your phone and you need to get a new phone, you want all your data to come back. So that's hard to build behind the scenes in a really robust way. So I originally built all that maybe in like 2017, and then I'm in the process now of scrapping all my old code from 2017 and rebuilding it. And it's really frustrating. It's hard to keep the momentum of working on it every day because in a situation like that, backing up someone's data, well, there are all kinds of errors that can happen. So obviously the successful way that it would work is, okay, you log a P, it backs it up to the, privately on the internet so that it can be restored if you get a new phone. But what if your internet connection's down? What if you're out of iCloud space? Sometimes people are on restricted devices where they're it's like a company phone and the companies put certain restrictions on it, so it can't use that backup system. So it gets really frustrating to test that because you have to test all the ways that it can fail. But it's also the same reason I like working on this stuff, because there's always a challenge and it's always very logical. And it's like, okay, these are the different things that can happen, and I'm going to try to figure them all out. I don't know. So I really like working on PNC and really iPhone apps in general and Apple Watch apps, because it's a really good creative outlet. There's the design aspect of how it actually looks, how people interact with it, but then there's also a lot of I just kind of think of it as building like a big machine, almost like it's a mechanical machine, because you do one thing here, it does another thing here, it's predictable, but then sometimes there are little problems and you have to kind of build a new machine to fix that. And you can always go back and like take the whole machine apart and rebuild it in a more efficient way. So that part's really fun. And then there's always just a challenge, something where it's like a way to kind of exercise my brain and always be learning something. And then also, even like you were talking about before, kind of the behavioral side of it. Well, how can I make this into an app that's helping people form good habits, but without, having side effect like bad incentives or bad habits that I'm causing someone to form. So anyway, I really just like that whole aspect of it. And then also, since I'm just working on it alone, it's the kind of thing where I don't really ever want either employees or someone else working on it, because I like that aspect of it where it's just it's almost like, okay, I can just create this one thing and bring it into the world, like get it out of my head into the world, and then see how people use it and make changes based on that.
So in terms of with your app development process right now, are you doing this full time? Like, are you full-time entrepreneur where you're able to get passive income from PNC and still work on your products for other
I'd say
projects?
It's not passive income. I mean, I don't have like a full-time job. I have a number of different projects. And that's kind of been over the years. I've tried to really do that. I had with PNC, I'm really trying to build that up because I think it has a lot of potential, but then I have other apps too. So there is another app that actually has more downloads, especially in Germany and mainland China. It has a lot of downloads, more than the US. Is an app. It's a very simple app for Apple Watch that just shows the iPhone battery percentage on the screen of an Apple Watch, where it sounds kind of obvious or like it should just be built in. But what I've found, there are a lot of people, for example, who will be at work somewhere and have a phone, somewhere else, but have an Apple Watch on, and then say, oh, my phone's getting low, I better go plug it in. Or, it's just a kind of a way you can keep an eye on it throughout the day. And I thought it was just an interesting idea. So I built it and released it, but then it turned out that it's an interesting problem to solve, of just syncing that between, getting the actual percentage from the phone to the watch on a regular basis to where it's useful. And so I released it, I think,
you have to go into the app to be able to see.
No, it's just right on the watch face.
Oh, nice.
It just shows it right on the watch face.
You have it now?
Yeah. So like, see, it shows my phone is at 42%.
And then does it have the battery for the actual
yeah, it does on the same little thing. So that's built in normally, but you can't normally get them both on one little display like that.
So 78 is the percentage.
Is the watch, yeah. So that one is a paid up front app. So it costs, I don't know, like $5, I think. And so people just pay for it up front. And that's, the revenue model of that one. So it might only get, 10 downloads a day, but people are paying up front for it.
Right.
And it varies a lot. And sometimes I'll make it free for a couple days, and then blogs will cover it and say, oh, look at this app. It's normally $5 and now it's free. So that gets a lot of press about it. But then I end up with a bunch of free downloads of people who probably just bought it for or they just downloaded it because it was free and not necessarily because they were seeking it out and would use it. But that's one of the other things I like about the app development is just the marketing side of it, like something like that. I think I did it accidentally once, where I had something at a price and then lowered the price to 0. And all of a sudden I got all these downloads, and I realized, oh, there are all these blogs that just cover paid apps that went free. So it's kind of like a fun loophole I found, I guess. I don't know if it's a loophole really, but it's a way to get some downloads and kind of build the momentum.
And then do you have like an email list associated with the apps? So like if
I
I were to
don't.
sign in.
No, and I was really big into email lists a long time ago, when when I first started the free sample site. But I really want to maintain privacy with these apps. They're all on iPhone and Apple Watch and Apple platforms, and I know they take more of a privacy stance. So I want to be really careful about that because I know that the users don't. For example, if you use P&C, all your P data is backed up, but only to your iCloud account, like your own personal iCloud account, in an encrypted way that I can't even access. As the developer of the app, I can't see anyone else's P data. It's just backed up in your own iCloud storage and restored from there. And so that's the kind of privacy thing where, I could easily put that all on a server somewhere, but I don't.
One thing that I was interested about was how you got into like business altogether.
Yeah.
Like, what started that journey and like the reason why you got motivated to want to kind of go the entrepreneur route?
So I originally I was interested. I always think I was interested in having my own business. Even from like in high school, I worked at Delta Sonic for a little while, doing the interiors of cars, and I just thought, I could do a much better job if I was just doing this on my own, because it's like you get like 15 minutes to do an interior, and it's like you get some smoker's car where you have to wash the windows like 5 times before it actually looks good. And I just wanted to, go from like a really dirty car to making a car super clean, like even if it took, 4 or 5 hours. So I started just like a small car detailing business. But I think that was kind of the first time where I really saw.
And this was back in high school?
Yeah, and it wasn't really that great of a business because I was doing all the work, but it was just kind of like, oh, I would rather, have more control over it and do my own thing, even though it's like, there are downsides. Obviously, I had to like find and maintain clients and things, but just the idea of, working for myself, I was always really into that. And then I originally thought I wanted to be an engineer because I really liked physics in high school. And so at first I started studying mechanical engineering, and I quickly thought, I'm just going to end up with a job, working in like at some big company all day. I was interested in it, but I thought I don't really want to follow this path and get a formal education in mechanical engineering. I'd rather, start some kind of business. So then I went to school for business and then learned software on the side. I started learning PHP and then Ruby on Rails, and I just started trying different things that way.
Was that during the mid 2000s?
Yeah.
Or so? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Late 2000s. And so
you didn't start learning app development until college then? Or not app development, just coding in general?
Yeah, but I didn't learn it really. I really just learned it online. I mean, there's so many good resources. Now there are even so many more. I mean, now it's amazing what there is. But even in 2006, 2007.
Now you could just honestly use the internet to learn. You don't even have to go to school.
Well, right. And that's what even back then, that's what I wasn't really learning as much in any formal environment. It was, I'd get like lynda.com videos, which I think are still around today. Like I think you can get them through a library now for free, but there are a lot of good courses now. There were still then though, just to at least get started. And I realized, wow, I can actually do this. I remember as a kid too, one time I really wanted to understand programming. I thought, oh, well, people write some code or write something and then it makes, this program on the computer, but I never was around anyone who could really explain it to me. So it wasn't really until the mid 2000s that I actually started to learn and it clicked. But it was really it was kind of the combination of, understanding how the code works and then also thinking about on the business side of things, kind of bringing those together, because that's really what it would take to have, something successful enough to make money and really be a sustainable thing. And I think that's what I'm kind of getting into with the apps. But one of the things, more recently, I'll release an app that I don't think it really even has a market, and it's just like a cool thing I built. I just read this book called Breath or Breathe by James Nestor. Have you heard of it? It came
Mm-mm.
out last year. I highly recommend it. It sounds stupid. It's a book about breathing,
Mm.
but it's actually really interesting. A lot of it's about how people over time have shifted more to breathing through their mouths rather than through their noses.
Actually, my friend was talking about this.
It's really interesting. He's got a lot of good sources and just different things he's drawn on in that book to kind of make his case about breathing through your nose. But I was interested in that and how it corresponded to my heart rate. So I made this app where you put in a threshold like 100 BPM, and then anytime your heart rate goes above that, your Apple Watch dings at like a certain and with a certain vibration too. And then when it goes back below 100, it does a different vibration and a different sound. And you can set that to 100, 80, 150 if you're working out or something, whatever you want. But the idea is just to help make you more aware of when you might be getting stressed out or something like that. And then, bring your attention to that so you can, do some breathing exercises or meditate a little bit and bring the heart rate back down. But that one I released, and it's a paid up front app for the Apple Watch only, but like I don't really expect people to download that in droves. I just thought it was cool, so I released it.
And what's the response for it?
I mean, not many people have found it. I haven't really marketed it at all.
It seems like a cool idea.
Yeah,
like,
it's
very
fine.
Useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It was also something where it runs in the background. So basically, like if I open up the app, it's called Beat Watcher, like your heartbeat. So I have it set to 100, and then I can put it into this background mode, and I leave the app, and it's still running.
Okay.
And in order to do that, it starts recording a workout on the Apple Watch, which is like if you were recording a run or something or snowboarding. And it can allow the app to keep running in the background. And,
like in all trails, like you're recording the hike as you're going.
And only apps that are recording a workout can actually run in the background and like continue to give sounds and vibration feedback. So it's a little bit of a hack because it's like, well, I'm not really working out right now. And then when you stop it, it just discards the workout. So it doesn't save it like, oh, you worked out for 10 seconds or whatever. But that was sort of a workaround I came up with, and I was just using it on my own. And I thought, I'm just going to submit this to the App Store and see if it gets approved, because I really didn't think it would, but it did. So now it's out there and anyone can try it, download it.
So compared to like that one and PNC, like PNC is getting way more traction.
Oh yeah. I mean,
so what's like the difference as far as like, what is an app that would be more attractive to getting people on board as opposed to that one? Because they both serve very useful functions, and they're simple,
Yeah, that one.
How come like that one isn't getting the amount of traction that PNC is?
I mean, it could, I guess. It's just super simple, and it's just a very simple tool. Where PNC, I think there's like a whole story to it, right? It's like, okay, hey, you're not drinking enough water, or you think you're not drinking enough water, and you want to drink more water. It's almost like this journey, right? You're like, you want to go on, and there's almost this whole little storyline of the app, and I'm trying to make it more that way, like a traditional story arc.
And you could put like creative design into the app itself too.
Yeah, I mean, like even there are all these different little kind of habit building things. So after like 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, like even when you first download the app, there's a whole little intro sequence, and I try to put funny things in there, like pee jokes and stuff, and I think it helps, it helps people if they just laugh a little bit, as they're going through it. It gives them this good feeling of, oh, I think I want to keep using this. And so it really has that long-term value of like using this app every day for, some people use it for years, where this other one, there's not really much of a story to it. It's kind of like, oh, this is a useful utility, maybe. There's another app I made, my first app, that I thought was going to be I thought there would be more people who would want it, but I kind of haven't touched it for over a year. But it's a simple app where, every time you take a photo, it saves the location with it.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Well, a lot of if you haven't changed the settings on your phone, usually that's what it does. And so around here, there are a lot of good medicinal mushrooms and things like chaga and reishi mushrooms
Around in this area?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
They're just naturally growing?
Yeah. And I mean, people pay a lot of money for these online or wherever.
Yeah.
And they, supposedly have a lot of really good benefits health-wise. And a friend of mine would, we'd go out in the woods and look for these. And sometimes we'd find them when they were too small and think, oh, I want to go back here later. So I was trying to think, okay, this is a spot in the middle of the woods. How can I get back to the same spot? And, I guess you can like make a pin or something on the map. But my idea was, well, what if I just take a picture of it? Then I've got the picture and the picture has location data in it. And I made an app where it's like a compass. So you just pull out your phone and it's like, oh, walk, 100 feet that way. And, that's where it was. And it points like a compass to like where the photo was taken anywhere in the world. So you can like walk back to it. And it can be used for like, if you find a good camping spot or hiking spot, in the middle of the woods, or people use it to find a car like in the parking lot. Like you take a picture of your car in a big parking lot and you can get back to it. But that was that was my first app. And I kind of thought at the time, oh, there are going to be so many people who want this. But it was kind of that same problem of, well, I thought I had a good idea, but just building it isn't enough to, find an audience. So
that ended up fizzling out then?
Well, it's still in the App Store. I just haven't worked on it because it doesn't have the same kind of audience as PNC, or Juice Watch is the other one that the one for the battery level.
Oh, okay.
That one, I think, that has by far the most downloads. But I don't know. It's just not as, it's not as, maybe for some people, for a lot of people, it's probably more useful than PNC, but I just think PNC is kind of a unique thing that I want to keep building on. I have a lot of ideas for it to kind of.
Do you think it might have to do with like the human element to it?
Definitely, yeah. I look at it, and I look at it as a way that I can help a lot of people in the world, like help people be more hydrated, because if people are more hydrated, then, maybe that helps them in other aspects of their lives or helps their health. I also hear from people who have certain medical conditions, like bladder and kidney conditions, where they'll use the app to monitor the symptoms, and then that can be a way that they make their lives better. So I kind of look at it as this foundational, fundamental thing. If I can help a lot of people be more hydrated, then hopefully I can have a really positive impact on the world that way. And so I'm trying to just keep growing it.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like something that would be really useful in the hospitals. You said like some medical practices were adopting it.
I think I've heard from some people who have said their doctors have actually recommended it to them as a way to just track their pee, and then you can export a CSV of it to give to your doctor, like a file that has all the data. Yeah, I haven't really tapped into that community too much. I also want to be really careful to not have an app that is giving medical advice. It's not designed to give people medical advice, really. It's just saying, hey, it's been a while since you peed. Maybe you should consider drinking water,
right.
But I do like that direction of at least being a way for people to keep track in a really simple way. And I'm trying to, build that out more.
Yeah. Well, I work as an RN over at Helio, an outpatient clinic, and I have close ties with the medical facilities. So if you're interested, maybe we could try to push it in that direction.
Sure.
Get people on board with it.
I always like people telling people about it and stuff. It's always a tough call though too, because, and this is something I find with people who have ideas and are trying to build them out, is that, the way I think of it now, like I think of it as, oh, it's a really terrible app. Like it's really not that good. I know about all these bugs and problems with it.
Yeah.
And even the intro, like when you first download it, I have ideas to improve that whole introduction. But then I have to remember that, there are people downloading this every day, getting hooked on it, really helping to improve their lives. So even though it's not in this state that I have it in my head where I want it to be, it still makes sense to try to get more people on it as it is now. I shouldn't try to wait until it's, perfect and super polished, because there was a time that it didn't have a little intro at the beginning and it kind of just threw people into it and they still kind of figured it out. So I'd really, it's tough sometimes to decide, should I really tell people about it and try to get more people on it, or should I, just focus on it more, build it more, and then tell more people about it. But I think it's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, definitely. And there's gonna be constant updates, like constant new devices that you have to like integrate it with.
Yep.
So it's just like, yeah, it's a process, definitely.
Yeah.
But it is like a balance of, I thought that was a cool like concept, is like you're trying to build the internals of it, like the app itself, while also the marketing side, which is like the external.
Yeah.
So it's this constant like, all right, I gotta like buckle down and go to the office and work on this, but also be out in the field and like get people on board. And it's like, it's a lot for one person to handle, but you're doing it. So.
The other thing that I really like about, the development part of it is, well, there's really, you can build mechanisms into the app that encourage the best users to share it with other people. So for example, sometimes an app will pop up and say, hey, what star rating would you give this app? You know what I mean? It'll pop up and say, hey, rate this in the App Store. And it has the stars right there for you to rate it.
I always get annoyed by that.
Right. Well, so you do, because whoever developed the app is just popping that up there, right?
Oh, okay.
I only show that to people if it's someone who's used the app every day for like 5 weeks, and then it pops up. So hopefully those people are like the 5-star people,
Yeah, they give you better ratings
right,
too.
Right. So, I mean, there are things like that you can do to help with that are more like integrated with the app. There's a really great app I use for skiing and snowboarding. Well, snowboarding, I only snowboard, but Slopes, it's called. And that's made by one guy, Curtis, who... that app has a really good mechanism where there's a premium subscription. So like I pay, I don't know, $20 a year for all the features of the app. But then if I go snowboarding, let's say you have the app and don't have a premium subscription. If he sends a survey by email after you use the app, like, oh, would you recommend this app to a friend? And if you say, I don't know, like 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, I don't know where the cutoff is, but if you rate it highly, then he sends a pass. He'll send me a pass that I can give to you to use premium for a day. So now it's like, well, he's taking the existing paying users and incentivizing them with something of value that doesn't really cost him any extra money, but it's to you, it might be extremely valuable to get this 1 day free. So there are mechanisms like that you can really build it, and that single feature requires a lot of kind of complex stuff with tracking the different users and building this email component and creating these passes for premium. And like it's a pretty complicated thing technically, but the rewards are probably huge because he's getting his best users to refer other users. Right. And so I'm always looking for those types of opportunities.
It's building that width, I think, of trying to spread because I always think of it as like the bigger you can build a network, let's say only 10% of those people out of the entire network are going to actually be like buying stuff on the actual app. Like Instagram, for instance, there's like only 10% actually pay Instagram, let's say, to post an ad. So the bigger you can build out that network, the higher potential there is. Right.
It's a big 10%. Feedback loop that keeps feeding into it. So
it's kind of like finance too. Like the bigger you can build that, the wealth of capital that you have, it's still only 10%, but that 10% of that wealth of capital is going to be more if you have millions of dollars as opposed to $20. So I don't know. Just that network effect is interesting to think about.
Certainly.
And outside of app development, you said you snowboard as well. Are there other hobbies that you're interested in?
Honestly, I kind of think of the app development. I don't really think of what I do as work, which I think is a good thing, I guess. Like all the different projects, I have a lot of different projects. I feel like I never get bored because like there's always stuff to work on. I haven't even talked about, everything that I'm working on, but I kind of I can always switch projects and kind of get a new creative outlet that way. And so it never really feels like work. So I don't really, I almost think of it as like work and hobby combined. It's like something I enjoy doing with, creativity, but I just like being in nature, going for hikes, going for long walks, going snowboarding, obviously is this time of year. It's great. I mean, this is in January that we're recording this. So, I mean, that's kind of the main stuff. I'd keep it pretty simple.
Do you travel much?
Uh, I mean, before COVID, I did a lot more, and I have been a little bit, just to go snowboarding, like going to Vermont, for example,
Okay.
to snowboard. Um, but yeah, I mean, I used to a lot more when in like maybe 2012 or around there, the early 2010s, I really traveled a lot. Like I'd, get a one-way ticket somewhere and like crash on a friend's couch or stay somewhere for like a couple weeks, or then go, bounce around one area, one city, and then go to another
Mm.
city for, 2 or 3 weeks.
Like couch surfing kind of thing?
Kind of, yeah, or
Snowboarding?
just visiting friends in different cities. Like I spent a lot of time in like the Bay Area, like San Francisco and Austin, Texas for South by Southwest, stuff like that. And just kind of bouncing around different places. But then in like the mid 2010s, I kind of ended up staying around Syracuse more, but still traveling quite a bit, just not as much as I was.
Mainly for snowboarding?
No,
Or just
not
in general?
even. Just kind of for
Mm.
variety, because I could kind of work from anywhere as long as I
Yeah,
had a
that's true.
laptop and a good internet connection. So kind of living a somewhat nomadic lifestyle, but not
Mm.
really. Like I always had, an apartment somewhere in most cases.
That's a cool thing about development.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Programming.
and I think people are now starting to see that. Obviously, a lot of people shifted to working from home with COVID, and now you're seeing stuff like, tons of people moving from the San Francisco Bay Area or New York City down to, Florida or Texas.
And they could still be connected to
Yeah.
Silicon Valley.
Right,
If
right.
they have like, let's say they're working for Google and
Sure.
COVID happens, everyone's working from home. Why
Right.
not just move to Texas?
Yeah,
If you're
I mean,
still working from
and
home.
no state income tax. There are other reasons other than the temperature, but yeah.
Have you ever been to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically like south of San Francisco. So
What's it like there?
I mean, it just
just-
seems like California. I don't know. You can go. I mean, it's kind of funny to think about if you go to, like, I had a friend that worked at LinkedIn, and like I went into his office once, and it's just, they have got all the snacks and like, gyms and like everything, like, I don't know, stereotypical stuff. But it's kind of funny when you drive past these buildings and it's like, oh, there's Google, there's Facebook.
Yeah.
My favorite thing though in Mountain View is the Computer History Museum. If anyone ever has a chance to go to that, I mean, that it's mind blowing just to see how quickly computers came up, and what. I mean, even in the 50s, there were these huge mechanical machines with punch cards, and like all these people would fill out the punch cards, like rooms full of people filling out the punch cards. And it seems like, oh, this is so complicated. Why would anyone ever build this whole system? But actually, that was all they had as far as computers. It seems so easy to take for granted what we have today with silicon chips and everything, when you see where it all came from and how quickly it all happened. So Computer History Museum is awesome, but that's in Silicon Valley and Mountain View.
It's only been like 20 years, right? Since the first
I mean,
computer,
like,
when was that?
It depends what you count. I mean, does an abacus count? So that's how the Computer History Museum starts off, is like at the beginning there's pretty much an abacus and some other things like that. But like from the 50s and 40s, I mean, that was really like World War II was a big accelerator of it all. So I mean, you can see that kind of equipment from like the 40s and 50s. And then during the Cold War, that accelerated a lot of it with SAGE, which was a system to, I mean, it was like a computer the size of a building with all these terminals, and it was a way to look for ballistic missiles coming in from the Soviet Union.
It's just kind of funny, like any crazy traumatic events that are happening in our history ends up like jump-starting technology even more. Like, for instance, COVID happening, pushing us to having work from home, and then all these people cooped up and probably programming as best as they could. Like I don't know, I think it was Kathy Wood that was talking about it, but she's a economist and financial manager, investor, but she was talking about how in all of these stock market crashes, it always spurs the economy towards like technological innovation that, like, even though the crashes happen, the big tech comes out of it ahead because more problems are created in our economy, our society. So that gets people who are in technology to be more focused and driven to want to like solve these problems.
Yeah, there's a really new interesting trend that I'm watching really carefully that started around, I don't know, probably like 2016 or 17. And it started a little bit in China, but then, spread to the rest of the world with, and now it was accelerated by COVID, but that's micromobility. So, transportation, like really rethinking transportation, and what's next for transportation. So a lot of people are really on this train of, autonomous cars. They're going to be self-driving cars. They'll be like taxis, like what we think of as a car now. And it just pulls up and you get in and, you go somewhere. But, and that's, Uber's big bet of like, okay, well, right now we have humans driving the cars, but eventually they'll just be, you order a car on your phone and there's no human driving it. But with micromobility, that's like these scooters. I mean, we don't really have them around Syracuse. I know there are those bikes, the docked bikes, those like green bikes. I forget, sync bikes or something.
Lime bikes.
Well, the Lime bikes, yeah, those are in other cities. I was trying to think of what the one around here in Syracuse. Syracuse obviously isn't the best
There's some
market
here,
for this.
just
Yeah,
right in front. I
know
what
they
they're
have
called, though.
their garage up on Tip Hill. I think I
really?
walked past it once, but yeah, so micromobility is really just the idea of vehicles under 500 kilograms, which is like 1,100 pounds. So, I mean, the
scooters and bikes?
Yeah, scooters, bikes. Yeah, bicycles, even just regular bicycles is an example, but also power assisted bikes, which are what those ones are around Syracuse. You still have to pedal, but it's helping you, and it's really easy to go up a big hill, and you can go much further distances, and they're more accessible to people who maybe aren't in the best shape, but yet they're still getting some exercise. So there are a lot of really interesting things happening with micromobility right now. There's a lot of shifting around in the space, companies buying other companies. For example, Lime is one I've got my eye on. They haven't IPO'd yet, and this isn't investment advice. I'm just like looking at this one really carefully because they've bought a lot of companies. They're kind of, I think, one of the leaders in the space, based on what I've seen compared to the other companies. And then you've got companies like Uber, which they sold off a whole, I think it was their jump bikes. Like they kind of shut that all down and canned the bikes. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening, but this whole space I'm really interested in because it got accelerated by COVID. People are less likely now, to want to ride on a public bus or something like that, but maybe more likely to say, instead of taking the public bus, I'm going to take the scooter. And the proliferation of those scooters over the past, I'm using scooters as one example, but scooters and dockless bikes, or even docked bikes, like what we have here, that has accelerated the development of new vehicles and improving those vehicles. So now it's like every 6 months, there might be a new design for the scooter to try to make it more durable and last for more trips and make it a more comfortable ride. But it's just an area that I think in the next 10 years is going to be really fascinating to watch. And with COVID, like you said, a lot of these cities have changed. They've introduced more bike lanes. They've either built more bike lanes or even did temporary shutdowns of streets that turned into permanent shutdowns. I think Europe, that's been happening a lot. But that brings in more opportunity for people with their own bikes, people with their own electric scooters or other types of vehicles, like even a boosted board, which they went out of business, but unfortunately, but I mean, that was a great product, and that's a form of micromobility. And then I think we're going to see things really change in the next 5 years, 10 years with that, where right now riding a battery powered scooter or even riding a bicycle isn't accessible to a lot of people, elderly people or people who just can't balance and everything. there will probably be some kind of vehicle in between a car and, these,
Like
and
a
that's,
golf cart kind of looking thing.
yeah, maybe even a golf cart. I mean, there have been these attempts at different vehicles, and there are a lot of. I mean, I don't know a lot of the companies. I can't come up with them off the top of my
Right.
head, but there are a lot. I mean, and then you can also look at companies like Van Moof, which is I think I'm saying that right. They're a company in the Netherlands that makes these really amazing electric bikes that don't even look like electric bikes and have a whole technology component to track them and stuff. So if it gets stolen, you can like recover it. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in innovation of the vehicles. And that's also, a lot of people have been talking about like an Apple car or something. But, what if they don't come out with a regular car, or maybe they come out with a regular car first and then some vehicle that is in between that's autonomous, that can go in a bike lane, but doesn't have the same barriers to use that a stand-up scooter does.
Do you think that would be effective here in Syracuse?
I don't
given
know.
The weather.
I don't know, but
but as far as like tech innovation goes, I
Yeah.
think this is a good avenue to go down.
Yeah.
But would you say that's the space that you're heavily focused on out of all the different stuff that's happening? Is the transportation, micro
mobility? Yeah. I'm not so much focused on it. Like I don't have any ideas in the space like of companies to build or anything, but I'm just really interested in watching it because I think it's a trend that is picking up a lot of momentum very quickly that a lot of people aren't really paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely not.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens, I think, just in the next 5-10 years in that area.
Do you study like tech innovation that's happening on like a macro point of view?
Yeah, I mean,
like
I think this is one trend that I've heard about and got really interested in because I think it's also because I have a lot of interest in cars. Like I've always been pretty interested in cars, like both the engineering of cars and then like car companies and kind of how they all fit together in the whole landscape of the world. And it's interesting that, obviously cars are, the US, most cities are built around cars, where when you go to Europe, it's like, okay, they were not built around cars originally. And that's where maybe micromobility fits in more. But I'm just kind of, I think I was interested in cars and then got into, kind of following different trends of different car companies and wondering what was happening with all this autonomy. Obviously there's Google, Uber, and Tesla are some of the biggest investors in autonomous technologies. And I think Uber shut theirs down, but then, GM, obviously, like they bought at least one big company, I can't remember which, to try to work on autonomy. So, I mean, there's a lot of investment going into this autonomy, but, is just a regular car like we think about it today with autonomy going to be widespread, or something else that's going to be something more like micromobility with autonomy?
Or a small vehicle, some sort, maybe like a one-person car.
Right, exactly.
That's, you just sit in there.
I mean,
because you let the robot transport you around.
And even like a 1990s Miata is like, I think less, maybe 1,500 pounds or something, or somewhere around there, less than 2,000. So it's not that far off from, 1,000-pound car or micromobility vehicle. So I mean, it like a 1-person or 2-person vehicle could be really interesting. And then you wonder, can it go in bike lanes, and how will this reshape different cities around the world?
So you hit on autonomous cars a little bit. Is that something you have doubt in, or as far as like that being possible to happen, or is it something that you think that micromobility will take over? Like, I guess I'm trying to get your thoughts on what's happening with Tesla right now, EVs, in that whole market, and where you think the market's headed towards in the next 5-10 years.
Sure. I mean, that's interesting. You said, Tesla and, autonomy and EVs, those don't necessarily go hand in hand. So that's, I think, a really interesting area where autonomy, I don't know. I mean, I think, eventually it'll exist, but then the question is when. Is it going to be in 30 years? Is it going to be in 50 years? Is it going to be in 5 years? Fully autonomous, where you get in and you don't have to even be a licensed driver to go in a vehicle somewhere.
How long do you think that'll be out?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't even want to speculate?
I don't know. I mean, well, I was just driving here we had a huge snowstorm last night, and I was just thinking, well, like, I wouldn't trust a vehicle to just drive me in this. I mean, eventually we'll get there, but the systems now, like Tesla's system is so good on the highway and even on just kind of regular roads. But it's still not up to where a regular driver would be. In some cases. Then there are other cases like, if there's a car in front of you and you can't see the car in front of that car, that's a case where cars with autonomous modes are better than the human driver, because if the car in front slams on the brakes, the radar on the car can pick it up and slam on the brakes, even if the car in between doesn't. So I mean, there are advantages right now that humans can't do, but overall I'd say that obviously the human wins. But
they do talk about how, like, if you have a whole network of autonomous, but if you have all the cars working in tandem with each other on like a supercomputer network, or so to speak, then they can communicate to each other. So like in your situation, like if the car in front slams on their brakes, the car in the middle and in the car in the back, like the car in the back will know that car in 2 rows up slammed on their brakes. So then they can all like be basically simultaneously communicating with each other to know like causal relationships.
Sure, eventually. I mean, what's the lifespan of a car? People are driving cars easily 40, 50 years old on the longer end, but more like 10, 20 years old. So how long will it take? Once, like, I think it's standard
with
now
the software
in the US.
or the
I just mean like cars, cars in general. Like, how long will it be before every car has that type of system? It's going to be a long time, because even if every new car made now has it, well, what percentage of the cars are new cars out there? Not
like the
not
adoption
very many.
rate. How quick will it be?
Well,
Okay.
and how long? Because people keep cars for a long time, so it'll take a long time. But I mean, every incremental thing with that's helping. And I think I don't know if it's a law now, but those braking, automatic braking systems, like that's a great innovation that will prevent a lot of people rear-ending other people. But you mentioned autonomy and EVs almost as one thing, but I think about it, like that's really almost two very different things. I mean, if you look at Tesla, for example, they have I like to think that those are really interesting vehicles because first of all, you've got the autonomy, which it could be even on a gas powered car. There's maybe some slight differences, but there's the autonomy, which is like its own thing, and then the electronic powertrain, which is kind of its own separate thing too, which is the batteries and electric motors. And so they kind of have rolled both up into one package that either one is very compelling, but together it's a really good package. But they're really getting into energy, which I think is extremely interesting with for example, their whole solar business and their whole battery business, the Powerwall, which is it's almost like a replacement for a generator, but it's really a thing that are you familiar with the Powerwall?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like, I mean, that's a really interesting, to have battery storage in your house like that, so it can make solar panels make more sense.
Because it used to just be where if you had solar panels, it would directly power the electricity that you have. There was no storage of that energy,
It would power your house if you were using that much, or it would go back to the grid and like your power meter would turn the other direction, and like National Grid would pay you for the power if there was extra. Yeah, but it's also a good backup system in case like when there are blackouts, or if the power goes out. It's a way to still be able to use power in your house or wherever. So I mean, they've got that whole business, but then one of the interesting things I just went down a whole YouTube hole of watching these very technical videos about the heating and air conditioning systems in Teslas, especially in the Model Y, which is like the small SUV they came out with last year, and the newer Model 3 now has the same thing where it uses heat pump, which is almost like running an air conditioner in reverse. It's like like if you put if you put some, your refrigerator cools things down inside it, but then throws off heat outside the refrigerator, right? So it's like that outer part throwing off the heat. That's like a heater, that's so they've built this really advanced system that's very power efficient to transfer heat around. So, I mean, you've got a lot of different things happening where the batteries have to be a certain temperature to run effectively in the car to get the most range and have the best performance. But then, the people in the car want to be a certain temperature, either hotter or colder than the outside air. And the motors throw off extra heat. So if you take all these, sources of heat and, needs for something to be hotter or colder, how do you transfer that heat around in a way that's most efficient? So, I mean, they're already doing that in these cars, but now the speculation, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious now, is that they're going to get into home heating and air conditioning systems that are extremely power efficient, and that also maybe combine with like a hot water heater where you might have extra heat being produced that's not being used, or a refrigerator. Like, how do you transfer this kinetic energy around in a way that's most efficient and, gets where people want it most, I guess, without using a lot of power. So that's an interesting, I mean, they've got a lot of interesting stuff beyond just EVs,
just Tesla?
Energy. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
well, I mean, a lot of people are working on that type of thing, but I'm just looking at how they're positioned with, like, they're already in a lot of people's houses with the power wall and solar panels, or both. And it's interesting to see that now they've got from, trying to build really good EVs and putting a lot of engineering effort into heat pumps and air conditioners, basically. They can take what they've built there and put it into people's homes. And it's kind of like they're just building this massive energy company. Plus, not to mention the batteries. Like I just mentioned it, but the batteries, it's like they've doubled the lithium ion battery capacity in the world. It's pretty crazy to see. So I don't know. I mean, it's funny too, because their stock price is just insane. And I don't have any Tesla stock because I'm just like, I think it's so insane how much it's gone up, but I don't know. I mean, they're really big, but they've only shipped, they shipped 500,000 cars last year. And, the big car companies are making more like 10 million cars in a year. So they've got a lot to catch up on the car side, but at the same time, they've got all this other interesting energy stuff going on, plus the autonomy. So it's kind of an interesting
to touch on the stock price. I think a lot of it is the hype that's been built up.
Yeah.
And people were kind of late to the show of like really understanding Tesla and what it's all about. And then just going on YouTube and seeing all these videos and being like, holy shit, like this is crazy. What's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? So it like blows up the stock price. Everyone's at home because of COVID. I think it's kind of valid though, because if you're making an investment, you're looking out to the next 5-10 years. But as far as evaluation, like current day, I don't think it's accurate. But if you're factoring in like what they could potentially be doing 5-10 years from now on, I think it's an accurate pricing for the future. But again, for now, I think it's kind of ridiculous. So will it drop back down? I don't know. That's what I'm kind of hoping for.
Sure.
Just to get in on the investment, because I was looking back at it back in like 2019.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was saving up a bunch of money to invest in Tesla, and then it blew up, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna go back down, but it never did.
Right.
And it just kept going up, and I was like, shit, I just missed out.
Yeah.
And then I changed my direction to Bitcoin, which we can talk about too. But I have some money invested in that, and I kind of had this feeling that there was going to be another surge of hype, similar to what happened back in 2017.
And 2013. A lot of people don't remember that one either. When it went up, Bitcoin went up to like 1,200, and everybody was like, "Whoa, $1,200! That's insane! I can't believe it got that high." But then it got up to 19,000 or whatever, 19,000, and then it got to 42,000. I don't know if this is gonna be, if it's gonna go even more now. I don't know, because we're getting down there.
Yeah, it's at like 30K, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But it's interesting because I wonder how low it'll go. Probably not 10,000. So I don't know.
Are you in right now?
Oh yeah,
you are. Okay. Have you? When did you start investing
in Bitcoin? Well, I had in 2013. 2013, I think. I had a Litecoin mining rig. Like, so basically it's like you get a bunch of
ant
graphics.
miner? Or was
No,
that
this was
Bitcoin?
before. So basically you build a computer, like a Windows computer, and it had three like gaming graphics cards, like three of like really high-end gaming graphics cards, and that's what does the computing. And so it would use like, I don't know, 700 watts of power or something, or maybe no more than that. I don't know. Anyway, it would just, I'd plug it in and it would just run, and it was part of a pool. So I would get
Yeah.
Litecoin from that. And then I think I sold all that for Bitcoin or something. I think I still have some Litecoin, but anyway,
Was it easier to mine Litecoin? Is that why you chose that route?
I can't really remember. I mean, it didn't really matter at that point. It was
Yeah.
like you could mine something, and I think Litecoin, you ended up with like just more of them, even though they were lower priced. I don't really remember why.
Like proportionately, they were the same, but
I
it
mean, it
just
was like you
looked
can always
more-
just take your Litecoin and exchange it for Bitcoin. So it was like,
Oh,
you
okay.
just mine something, and then,
It's so all like interconnected. Like if one crypto goes up, then they all kind of like rise that
kind of. But I
ride
mean,
that wave.
Ethereum only got to like 1,400 this time, and its previous high was like 1,200, I think. So that was surprising to me because I wasn't sure, how Ethereum's going to do there. I mean, there's so many now, and what happened the last time around was crazy with, everybody having these ICOs, like, and introducing new coins and hyping them up, and
then selling out, like the owners selling
yeah,
out
so a
and
lot
just
of them
leaving
were
everyone
just
in the
scams.
dust.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing with that aspect, but I got into it back then and was just interested in it, and then that was before when it ran up, I think in 2013 to like $1,200, and then it was down for years until
This was
2017.
Bitcoin?
I mean, all of them.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there weren't that many then. It was maybe like Bitcoin and Litecoin, and I can't remember even when Ethereum wasn't even around then, I don't think. And then 2017 was interesting with that run up, and then after that, I was kind of like, all right, this seems to have some legs, but I can't believe, with COVID, I was surprised it went down so much when the market crashed in mid March of last year. But at the same time, you have to think like there were people with money in that needed cash right away. They were concerned. They wanted to go into cash, and, it really dipped down to like, I don't know, Bitcoin was really low, like almost 3,000 at that point. I think long term it's interesting to me because it's kind of got that like the name brand. It's like the main one, and Bitcoin's kind of a cool name. Like people know Bit. It's like computers, but a coin, like money. So I don't know. It just seems like a good name to me, and it's interesting. Like it probably won't be the main one for transactions and everything unless the Lightning Network can really like get momentum and everything with it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just interested in it because it's like the main one.
Is that the main reason why you're invested? Is because you see it, like, do you see it becoming, I don't know, like, how bullish are you on the whole thesis?
I mean, I think it's, I'm really bullish on it.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I worry though. I mean, I think it's been really battle tested at this point as far as just like security and hopefully being resistant to 51% attacks, and like, it would change, I guess, with quantum computing, but I think it's technology wise, it seems pretty sound at this point. If we're however many 10 years into it, but I worry. I mean, I don't know how they would do it, but it really seems like the exact kind of target that governments would really try to crack down on going forward. And so I think that's like kind of what I'm most nervous about.
The government regulation for Bitcoin?
Yeah, and like trying to get people to not have their own private keys, to actually be able to hold it in cold storage on their own, to like have it themselves. Like, how basically when you get a bank account in the US, you have to fill out, KYC, AML, like know your customer and money laundering forms. And that's to track your identity associated with the account, so that if there's suspected money laundering or something like that, they know whose account that is. But with a cryptocurrency wallet, you can just have that, and sure, the especially with Bitcoin, the ledger is is public, so you can know what addresses have what and where it's going. But, for whoever owns that wallet, well, there's no documentation to say who that is. And so I could just see like, that being considered a problem, especially.
But they're still able to track the wallet through the ledger. So
Yeah.
they just don't know whose name is associated with that wallet.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
Well, I mean, I think the bigger issue is just control over. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of deplatforming now, where people are getting kicked off of certain platforms, like YouTube, for example. And one of the big ways people make money from YouTube is Patreon. So if someone has something on YouTube that either YouTube doesn't like, or someone who has influence over YouTube doesn't like, that person can get kicked off of YouTube. Now that person, doesn't have views. But then also someone like Patreon could say, okay, we're cutting you off too. You're kicked off of Patreon. Now that person doesn't have, an income source. And that's all through, like the traditional like money system of, okay, sending dollars to people through Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
But if this person still has an audience and wants to take money through Bitcoin, well, now it becomes a lot harder to cut that person off. How do you deplatform this person from Bitcoin? And that's a scary thing, because what if now someone who is, not aligned with what either YouTube or Facebook or, a government entity wants, is able to acquire all this value through Bitcoin and can't be shut down through the regular banking system. It's
is that a bad thing though?
I don't necessarily think it is, but it's also, but the way they go after it is they say, oh, well, people buy drugs with Bitcoin, or, oh, there's, people, all kinds of illicit things you can do with Bitcoin basically. But it's like, okay, the same thing with cash. And obviously that's more trackable. Well, to some degree,
it's less trackable.
It is, but it's like, at least they have control over the dollars, in the end, or the whatever currency.
So just for people that are listening in, so like Bitcoin, how it's
going
tracked,
off on a tangent here.
It's tracked through the public ledger.
Yeah.
And the only anonymity to it is the fact that me, Kyle Fisk, is not associated with the crypto wallet. It's decentralized. Okay, how do I explain
so
this?
It's like you've got an address. Your address is 1234, right?
And they don't know that's associated to me. It's just the wallet itself.
Well, they might, who's they, but whoever it is might not. Whoever has access to the ledger doesn't necessarily know that. But if you have a Coinbase account and that's your address, well, yeah, that they're very, they know their customers pretty much, I would assume. But
okay, so all I'm trying to say is, like, since it's on a public ledger, and anyone can go into that ledger on a Bitcoin and see, okay, this is what crypto wallet is associated with these transactions. And then that crypto wallet, if you're on Coinbase or Cash App, whatever it might be, is associated to me, then all of that is tracked publicly then. So they would be able to know, and they wouldn't be able to regulate and like print out money and like prevent distribution of that money. But they would at least be able to see all those transactions that are associated with me. And I just don't really understand the argument as like, oh, it's just for use of drug.
I don't think so. It's not.
Like
but I'm just saying that's how this regulation can come into play. It's like, oh, well, doesn't everybody agree that, child pornography is bad? We need to ban this because, whatever. Like, same with anything that's encrypted, right? So like anything end-to-end encrypted. That's why, like with the San Bernardino shooter, how Apple wouldn't unlock the phone because they would have to put in a backdoor to the encryption. This was a couple years ago now, but
like they couldn't gain access to it because it was
the
encrypted.
FBI said, hey, we want to be able to access this guy's phone. Will you help us? And they said no, because if we introduce a backdoor for that, then it, breaks encryption on every iPhone. And they're like, we take a stance that we care more about privacy. But then you see other examples of Apple taking kind of a different approach where, for example, if you, iCloud, or what is it? iMessage is end-to-end encrypted. So it's, if I send you a message, someone monitoring our internet connection in between can't read that message without the key that's on, our phones. But when you back up to iCloud, it also backs up the key. So if you use iCloud backup, it's not really encrypted because whoever has access to that backup can get the key. And then Apple's part of Prism, which is like the big government surveillance program. Oh,
I just ran out of battery.
Oh no.
Hopefully it's saved.
Okay. Getting on the Bitcoin stuff. All right. So the battery died, but we're back. We were talking about...
Sorry about that.
I don't know where did we leave off?
I think something about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin and... I think I was
Crypto.
talking about... Yeah, well, just how... I was talking about how it's... People right now with like the existing channels, I mean, even you look at something like YouTube, people get kicked off of YouTube and then that's their livelihood gone because it's this centralized service. And there has been over time different decentralized services, like if you think about like BitTorrent, I don't know if you're familiar with
like
that.
LimeWire.
That was, I think, wasn't it peer? Yeah, that I don't know if that was centralized.
Like
I can't
the
remember.
seeding things.
Yeah, but these decentralized systems, haven't really won out because the centralized systems have kind of some more efficiency behind them. But now that we're seeing more people getting deplatformed and things like that, especially from financial platforms, I'm wondering how much we're going to see both the growth of decentralized services, like a decentralized YouTube, which there are a number of them, and also how that fits in with decentralized currency and the ability to just send something of value over the internet to people, in a secure way anywhere in the world.
Do you see that being the new infrastructure?
Maybe. I mean, in some ways, but I mean, it depends on the service. I think in general, it seems like the centralized services win out just for efficiency, but I could see if enough people care about deplatforming or don't agree with who's getting kicked off of these platforms, or there's enough momentum around another decentralized platform in a certain area, whether it's video or some sort of communication or Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies for sending value. I mean, I think we'll probably see that grow. And I know earlier, before we started recording, we were talking about podcasting, and that's another interesting one where it's like you see podcasting's been around since like 2004, I think 2003 maybe. It was introduced. I mean, it was originally based on blogs, like RSS feeds for blogs. Do you remember like Google Reader? You could subscribe to a blog and you'd get all the posts. And then, instead of just an article, the idea was let's attach an audio or video file to it. And then there was a special kind of RSS reader, something like Google Reader, but just for podcasts. And it would just check the feed. Oh, there's a new file, download the file. And it was just hosted on a server like any website. Or any file normally. It didn't have to go through some third party. There are directories like the Apple directory, and a podcast could get delisted from the directory, but as long as that RSS feed address still works, you can still check it for new episodes, download the episodes, as long as the server where that's running doesn't get shut down. And I think that's an interesting thing that now, like I know this, you said you distribute through Anchor, right? Which is owned by Spotify. Spotify has this whole thing, this whole directory of things they call podcasts, but they don't fit into what I just described, which is this RSS feed model. Because
it's centralized,
right? And they control it. And to have a podcast on Spotify, that you have to agree to their terms and conditions. With what I would consider real podcasting, which is just hosted somewhere else with an RSS feed that may be also listed on Spotify, but that doesn't have a gatekeeper. The only gatekeeper is the stuff really high up on the internet, like DNS, and that's...
so it's kind of like decentralized audio or files? file sharing?
Yeah, I would say it's like well, yeah, I mean there used to be more video podcasts, and that's all part of the specification. Like when it used to be, when iTunes rolled out in, whatever it was, 2003 or 4 or something, and first supported podcasts, it supported both video and audio podcasts. But then, over time people got more away from video and it became more of an audio medium. But most podcast players will support just, put in the URL of the podcast, and you can get it that way. And so it's interesting to see, even with that, for example, Joe Rogan moving from a podcast with a YouTube channel over to Spotify, right? Well, then it's not what I wouldn't consider it a podcast anymore, because it's isolated on their platform. But then it's a more centralized thing. Now it's, if he has a guest on, now it could create controversy within the company, and they're basically vouching for things that are on it. Where if he's just doing a podcast with some people independently and hosting it independently, then that, who's the gatekeeper there?
There's no false information, that, or at least people are telling the truth. Now it's like this acting sort of thing. If he gets in the situation where gets into conflict with Spotify's agenda.
Yeah, right. And that, I mean, it's just that that's obviously a big example, but it's just the idea that anybody can independently create a show and distribute it, almost like with a website. Like you can put up a website and distribute it, but then you run into things like, well, what about then when the hosting company gets involved, like what just happened with Parler and AWS, where they shut them down and said, you can't even use our servers.
Yeah, let's get into that actually. What was that all about?
Oh,
the Parler thing. I heard it very briefly.
Well, it was an app. It was a Twitter-like app for people who had been deplatformed from Twitter. Like they got kicked off of Twitter, but it was still centralized. It was still on a server somewhere, so it could easily be shut down with the hosting company getting shut down. But the reason I think it's interesting with it ties in with the podcasting part of it that I'm talking about is it's interesting to me because it's still this area where there can be shows, and it's not like YouTube where someone can just be kicked off of it. Kicked off of podcasting. Someone can be kicked off of a podcast directory, but podcasting, as a technology, hopefully people will still continue to make podcast apps that work the traditional way with RSS feeds and things like that. Because
what was the utility of that? Was it for the sake of freedom of expression and speech? Using the RSS feeds originally?
Well, it was really a mechanism to distribute audio. It was almost like it was before, it's hard to almost imagine this time, but it was before streaming audio was a big thing, because internet
CDs,
connections were slower.
MP3s.
It was a little bit around there. It was almost like a radio show version of a blog was kind of the idea, because it was almost really a blog with an audio file almost that was fetched by a certain kind of reader. One of the initial use cases was, you had an iPod, you plug it into a computer. That computer's been sitting, on the internet overnight and downloaded some new shows. You plug in your iPod, it puts those shows onto your iPod, and now you disconnect it and you can go and you can listen to those shows. And so that was kind of how it worked. And these attachments were just downloaded to the computer and then moved over to the iPod, where now it's turned into more of just something that's called a podcast, where it's just really just like this streaming thing. It's interesting though. It's a pretty cool history of it. This guy, Adam Curry, was one of the inventors of it basically back then. And still has a podcast to this day that's I think a very well done podcast. But he's working on something called Podcasting 2.0, which is really kind of taking that original podcast model and building in some new things, like being able to actually make direct payments to the people whose podcast you're listening to. And it's almost like it's like what I would consider the path of the true version of podcasting, in a world where now it's being diluted by, Spotify getting into it. Apple kind of made the directory back then and just hasn't really done much other than that with podcasting, except they have their own podcast app that ships. And then there's a whole ecosystem of other, third-party podcast apps, and then other companies that have tried to do different things at different areas in the stack, like Libsyn, which they will host podcasts, but then they inject ads and things like that dynamically. So if you're in Syracuse and you're downloading a podcast, it might have an ad for like a local car dealer, and that's kind of how that all happens. But it's interesting. I'm really interested to see how this goes. Like if this deplatforming stuff really keeps amping up and people are getting kicked off of these platforms, what will happen with, the Spotify style of, what's called podcasting versus like real, like well, not so much decentralized, but like RSS based podcasting, and this whole idea of podcasting 2.0.
If it'll resurface.
Yeah, I mean, it's still out there. Like that's how most podcasts are still working. Like most podcast, like if you have a podcast app, like Overcast is the one I use, which is I like that one. It's made by one guy, again, like an app just made by one person, with a revenue model. And, it's kind of cool, that one person can make such a good app. But when you go and search for a podcast, all that's happening is behind the scenes in the directory, it has that RSS feed address, and then it's saying, okay, subscribe to this. And then your podcast player is just checking that RSS feed address. And anytime there's a new one, it downloads it. It downloads the file so you can listen to it later, or you can, stream it from the server. Yeah, it's interesting. So I mentioned, Adam Curry, who was like one of the inventors of podcasting. His podcast with John C. Dvorak is the other guy, No Agenda, it's called. They do it live twice a week, where it's broadcast live and then available as a podcast. But it's really interesting to see the whole ecosystem they've built up around it, where it's all donation based. So they consider themselves somewhat uncancelable or undeplatformable because they don't have advertisers, so they don't have to answer to the advertisers and what the advertisers are saying, and they are funded by people listening to them and saying, oh, I got value out of this show. So as long as they keep making something that people find valuable,
get the donations,
and they don't get kicked off of their hosts, which hopefully, it's the kind of thing where you can kind of keep moving around hosts, I guess, if a certain host doesn't like you. But it's kind of interesting to see, watch what's happening there, because I know there have been clips from that show that then will go on YouTube and get, kicked off of YouTube. So then it's like, well,
because of just like the explicit nature to it?
No, not even. It's because of stuff like they'll play a clip like of something that like Anthony Fauci even said back in like March, and then YouTube will say, oh, that's misinformation because he told people not to wear a mask, even though it was a clip of, like an actual clip from, yeah. And so it's pretty wild to see what's happening with these platforms and like where this all might go. But I'm interested, that it's interesting to see, with these, especially podcasting is something I've always been interested in, since it was first a thing, and now, all the way through to today, seeing what'll happen with it.
Yeah. And I think ultimately it's about the decentralization of it. So having no person at the top making the orders and dictating what people are trying to get out into the world. Hopefully it's the truth, but just having that freedom to say whatever you want. Do you see any promise in Ethereum playing a part into this?
Ethereum,
with how the infrastructure is, it's a decentralized platform. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's as far as the whole distributed apps or dApps area, I don't know a lot about that. Or, I mean, there could be, I don't know. I would say probably as far as just like podcasting, any of these cryptocurrencies could be a good avenue. Well, some of them could be a good avenue for, giving donations or, somehow funding things that you want more of, like artistic endeavors or, podcasts or whatever it is. I mean, I guess it depends like where you're getting that content, but it's just the idea that, I think that that we might see more of this, growth of cryptocurrency just for sending money even overseas, like cutting out things like Western Union, or these companies that charge really large fees to send money. I mean, that's like one basic use case. Like Western Union, like if you wanted to send money to somebody in Europe, right, like how would you, there are a number of ways you could do it, but like you're going through some other third party, going through the banking system, versus just sending some either Bitcoin or another, like either a USD tether or something, directly to an address, and there's no middleman.
And like Cuba, for instance, that country's so locked down that even if you try to send money over there, it has to pass through the government to be approved. And it's like this long chain of events to be able to get to that point to send it. And you could just send Bitcoin over to someone. And it's definitely a privilege being in America, and a lot of the issues that are happening around the world that make Bitcoin so promising or so like hopeful. We don't have to deal with a lot of those issues. So as far as like trying to create a global network or a global finance exchange, I think crypto is one of the best options.
It'll be interesting
that we have right now.
I'm interested to see what happens with it all, and what kinds of new uses people come up with too, and dApps and things like that.
Do you think we covered most of the stuff you wanted to went
over?
I
didn't really have any real agenda of stuff to cover, I guess. So it's been good talking. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too. Thanks for being on the podcast. I'll have to thank Tom for getting the referral over to you. But yeah, it's been a good time.
All right, thanks.
So before I end the podcast officially, there was something that I want to talk to you about, and it's basically an app idea that I have. That I've been kind of building out in my head. For the past couple years. Kind of alongside with the brand. But we're talking a lot about decentralization and how blockchain is a promising avenue for potentially social networks in general, to be able to give people that freedom of expression to do what they want to do and not having a centralized control, kind of like the libertarian ideology of just being free to be yourself. So I was thinking if you could pair somehow the decentralization or Ethereum blockchain infrastructure to a social network, and like you're saying, there's YouTubes out there, or there's platforms like YouTube that are decentralized. A social network that's on a blockchain, but also another layer to that being that, and I'll just get right into it because I'm having trouble like sorting out my thoughts. But basically when you go on the app, it's kind of like a journal of some sort where you can write down, or it's like a journal for multimedia based off of your own like documented experiences. So you can post on there and you can be like, this is the stuff that I'm doing. And you kind of create like a collection of all these pieces of media that represent who you are. And this might be a little bit too future oriented. Like, I don't know if we can necessarily do this now, but if you have an AI or an algorithm that's able to understand who you are, kind of like a personal assistant of sorts. And then as you develop yourself on that app, the AI or personal assistant's able to understand you more and more. And then it's able to build out basically like a personalized algorithm of sorts to then be able to, still on a blockchain, connect you with either other people, places, things that are happening within that network that will align with your values. So in simplest form, you go on the app, you create content that represents you, which is already happening. Your AI is able to understand your values, and then that AI through the network is able to connect you to other things that align with those values. So it's a different approach than this is going to be hard to communicate because it's not like fully sorted out, but like the models we have now with YouTube, it's kind of like more externally seeking, where it's like you go out and you try to find content, or like YouTube itself will recommend things to you that are like outside of you. And it's kind of like this controlling force that like oh, I'm getting stuff and it doesn't really match me, and it's just like it's kind of aligned with me because I watched a video of that like last week, but the AI or algorithm doesn't really have a good sense of like really understanding who that consumer is. So, but like if you flip that whole business model to being more like it's basically trying to get people to be more introspective too in themselves. And I'm throwing a lot at you, so stop me if this is a bit too much, and I can sort it out. But like basically the whole premise is to try to get people to understand themselves and gain self-awareness and really build a relationship with the algorithm and who they are, to like ask those questions. And then it's also trying to get people a more sense of meaning and fulfillment in their lives because they're able to get connected with things that align with who they are. So like approaching this from the philosophical standpoint while also trying to use technology to match those kind of agendas.
So you're looking to basically like surface things to someone that are amazing recommendations, but I never would have thought that I would have liked that.
Right, because a lot of times like, well, also getting people so they just focus more on themselves as opposed to what's happening around them. Because in this app, you could just focus on yourself. Like, who am I? Really hone in on your interest, put that out there, create your personalized profile, and then the AI does the work to seek out things that match up to that. Whereas in our model, I feel like a lot of people are trying to seek outside for validation because they need a market. They need to get it really is just like the capitalistic not knocking capital. It's just where we're at. But like trying to get money based off of like building out a network and like finding other people that give you a sense of approval, whereas trying to find your own sense of approval within yourself and then letting technology do the work. It's just, do you kind of see that like working on the others?
You got a lot of different moving parts here, but I think that I've often also thought about an idea of just what's an app that people would like go into, and because it's almost like any time, Facebook and Instagram, like just the whole feed idea, I guess Twitter too, but Instagram especially, and Facebook, same company, but they've developed their algorithms so that if you have any little fraction of time, you can just observe people doing this at any little fraction of time available, they'll just find themselves in Instagram, not even consciously thinking about it. Either it was just a notification that went off, or the little thing that suggests apps on the iPhone, where it's like, it shows apps you've used recently. And Instagram happens to be in there, and then you click it and now you're in Instagram and you're just waiting in line for 2 minutes for something, but now you start scrolling and it just becomes a habit. Now you're just sitting on the couch even though you're like watching a movie. Now you find yourself going through Instagram, and it's like
it takes you out of yourself.
Yeah, right. And I like that what you're talking about sounds like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But then the question is, and this goes back to what we were talking about way earlier, how do you actually get people into those good habits? How do you use this technology for good to help people be more introspective? I like that aspect of it a lot. And, I've thought about that too. Like even sometimes I'll open the notes app and just start, kind of writing stuff, like journaling stuff. And I'll go back and look at the notes and delete notes and edit notes. And it's kind of like, oh, what would it's a way to be a kind of introspective and journal. But I think the problem is now that these other apps are just so good at getting people's attention and they get addicted, to looking at Instagram and stuff, where unless you really take steps to tell your phone, no, don't recommend me Instagram, or limit the time I'm allowed on Instagram every day, then, that's like, it's just going to happen. So I think it's interesting too. It's almost like a question of how do you make people aware? Even if this app existed, how would you make people aware to the point where they'd want to, they'd get some sort of mental reward from doing this. I think it's by using it.
All right, so I'm gonna lay it all out there.
Okay.
But I think it's about being transparent with people and being like, if you become more introspective and you understand yourself, this AI will do the work and be able to connect you with things that are authentic to who you are. So just laying that out there, being transparent with the consumer, being like, yep, this is what's going to happen, and it's kind of up to you at that point. And another element to this that I think is going to be really crucial moving forward is the decentralized nature. The reason why I see that being a really important aspect is because we're going to have eventually automation and AI basically controlling us. You're going to have
already does.
It already does. And so the decentralized infrastructure will allow us to have our own control of our data. And there's avenues of like data monetization based off of like, like Facebook, they're making money off of a bunch of people off their data for using their platform
for ads,
for ad space. Well, if you have decentralized networks with blockchain, then everyone owns their own data and they have the decision whether or not they want the AI or platform to use their data space to send them ads, basically. It's a model that utilizes this kind of system is called Brave.
Oh yeah, Brave, yeah.
Brave browser.
Oh yeah, definitely. That guy, I mean, the guy that started it, he used to be at Firefox, right? And then he got deplatformed from his own web browser company, basically, and started Brave. But
so it'd be the similar aspect to that.
They have some. Does Brave use attention tokens?
It's called
basic
BAT,
attention tokens.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I'm not super. I have a bunch of friends that use Brave, and I haven't made this switch yet. But I know, like, I see what you mean with the, having a token for your attention. I mean, that's what things are getting to these days, right? It's like I was saying with Facebook and Instagram, by default, they end up with so much of people's attention. And how can you shift that attention? I mean, making people aware by having a token issued for attention, and like, hey, watch this ad and you get these BATs. Like, I don't know if that's the right approach, but I mean, it's certainly interesting to put, because it's like, hey, time is all you have, right? In the end. So how do you choose to spend that time? And I like how you're thinking of like getting. There's a lot there. There are a lot of moving parts that you mentioned. I think that, if you can figure out a way to focus in on one thing, it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be a blockchain app or a decentralized app, but even just, what are you seeing? What does the app look like when you open it? And what's the simplest thing you could offer if you really want to, like, develop something and come up with something compelling, starting with one really small piece could be, the way to at least start, instead of when you have so many different moving parts, it can difficult. Be, there has to be a priority of like, well, one must be more important than the other. And so where do you start?
I think the most important aspect would be the personal assistant AI, being able to build that relationship with it. And that's a scary thing, but I think that's inevitable of what's going to happen in the future. And then having it decentralized so the AI doesn't control you. But like being somewhat practical, like if we took the Brave browser and you had a personal assistant on there that was able to understand you, then when Brave sends you ads or sends you things that are linked to you, or it's just basically sends you stuff so you can earn the token to be able to like consume that content, then it would be sending you stuff that is actually relevant to you. But ultimately, I think we just need better AI systems for personal assistance. And I don't think we're there yet with our technology. So I think that's where the world's headed to, but I don't know if like a part of me is kind of hesitant to want to pursue this because I don't feel like we have the capabilities of doing something like this yet. But I just see that being as a very crucial thing for our own like individual freedom on a social network platform.
I really like the idea of just having, I don't know what it would look like, but just the idea of an app where it's like some app that people want to open in those little pieces
instead
of downtime.
Instead of it being addiction.
Well, maybe it's like a good addiction, like a good, that's maybe an oxymoron, but like a good habit, where it's like, oh, I have this little bit of extra time. And I even do it to myself. I'm like, wait, why am I opening my email and habitually checking my email, hoping that I'll have another email in there, which I probably don't want that email. Why am I not opening even as simple as the Notes app? And, looking at my notes and adjusting my notes and thinking about, reflecting on life, reflecting on my goals, journaling, things like that. How can, what's an idea that helps shift people
It's the mindset,
to that. And I guess, I mean, it's interesting to me that, people really like spending time on these apps, and it's really sad to see. I mean,
But do they really?
They don't like it, right? That's
Right.
the thing, is it's like it makes them feel terrible. I mean, in my opinion, it seems like it makes people really sad and depressed, especially I can't imagine being like 10 years younger or more. I mean, I guess like 20 years younger. I'm getting old, but and having these apps, and that's all you've ever known in your life, and it's everybody just putting on this like superficial, this is how great my life is kind of thing, and never feeling like you can keep up, and it's just like, oh, this person has 1 million followers, and it's yeah, I mean, I would love to figure out ways to kind of break out of that. Like, what can you find that people actually feel the mental reward for spending their time on something positive? It's a pretty abstract, but I think
It's all just personal development, like how you can make apps to foster personal development while still being on a network.
It's tough though, but it's like, yeah, people want the easy way out. They don't want to have to think, so it's a tough.
One thing that I do see though in how our social media is happening and developing now is you're getting like two sets of audience bases. Like and the only reason why I'm like making these connections is because I'm going through it with through the brand and seeing social media in a different way, because you're approaching it as an entrepreneur. But I see two audience bases where you have the creators and you have the consumers. So the creators that are on, let's take Instagram, for example. They're on there using Instagram as a tool to be able to get awareness for their brands that they're creating. While the consumers on there, because they're either trying to escapism or like pleasure seeking or like trying to connect with friends, like using it for what it's supposed to be used for. But I think as far as mindset goes, those are two totally different approaches. Like the only reason why I'm opening up Instagram is because I'm posting something and I'm trying to build community or network in real life. Basically, I'm trying to build connections and meet new people and using it to my advantage. Whereas the consumer is kind of getting crushed by Instagram if they're just going on there and like unconsciously consuming content that's making them feel bad. But I mean, same thing happens to me too. Like I'll go on there and I'll start unconsciously like comparing myself. So it happens to both audience spaces, but I think it's initially the creator might be more deliberate in their approach with social media because they've maybe taken the time of like had the introspection to know, okay, this is what my values are and what I want to pursue. And now I'm using social media as a tool to get those things that I've thought about wanting. Whereas the consumer might not have gone through that introspection, or they're just using the tool for a different purpose that's not as deliberate. So again, like I'm saying, in introspection, I think ultimately should come first, and the generation that's coming, the younger generation that's getting onto social media, there's no infrastructure there to motivate people to be more introspective, to like understand themselves. So I don't know. I just think we need that right now in this world.
I mean, I would. Yeah, it sounds like a good mission to get people more introspective for sure, and just thinking about things instead of just responding to stimuli.
Yeah, it's just like, what do I want? And instead of, because like on an economic model, me as like a business person, I could put out just clickbait and I'm just trying to get attention. And if someone's unconscious to that, like it's so easy to manipulate people to be able to like, oh, this is just feed them what they think that they want. But it's like a drug addiction. Like you give someone this, they taste it, they get hooked, and they keep wanting to come back for it. But in the long run, it's going to be to their detriment. And it's not really developing them. It's just only making the person who's giving them that drug. Yeah, it's only helping the people at the top.
Yeah.
It's not empowering, it's enabling.
Well, I mean, Instagram, it's like they're trying to sell ads, they want to make the, like you were talking about, algorithm. It's like they want the best, uh they want to show you the most relevant ads, where you're most likely to buy. And that's why, the cost of Instagram and Facebook ads has gone up so much. And other less targeted ads and have gone down. But yeah, I'd really like the idea of trying to figure out some sort of more introspective idea for an app. And it reminds me almost, there I know there's an app where it's like it's like a garden or a trees growing or something. And it only happens when your phone is down and you're not using it. And anytime
cool.
you pick up your phone, it's like the garden stops growing or something. So I forget the name of it or how it even works, but it's like that kind of idea where it's like incentivizing you to not be on your phone. And I think it's an interesting idea. Sometimes it's those types of things are detrimental, though, because I know you sent me some messages, some Instagram DMs, and I have a thing set, for like no more than 5 minutes per day on Instagram.
Okay.
So what would happen is I wouldn't get them till the next day. Because I'm trying to make myself very aware of when I'm on Instagram or how much time I'm spending on it every day. But then sometimes it can get in the way of communication and stuff. So I think there are these trade-offs with all kinds of apps and developments like that. So yeah, it's an interesting idea, though, to try to get people to develop more introspective habits. I love that idea. I need to do that more myself, journaling and things like that. I like a good journal app once in a while, but at the same time, that's kind of pretty simple on the surface. And it's interesting you've kind of got some ideas of ways to expand on that.
I think we just need a good enough reward to be pursuing personal development.
The reward is yourself, right? It
is
the new you. Yeah.
Is there a way to pay people, essentially,
I guess, right,
to be personally developing or introspective?
Yeah, pay their future selves.
I guess it is. Yeah.
Well, like vision, kind of, like The Secret and all of that, where it's like, oh, envision what you want in the future. I think there's a lot of value in that. Obviously, The Secret, it's kind of like, okay, that's way out there, but
I like it.
Yeah, sure.
I haven't read it, but I've heard stuff about it.
There's like, I've seen clips of the, documentary or whatever. But just the idea of, picturing what you want, or, deciding, oh, this is what I really want in my life. I think that can be really motivational, and a lot of people don't even do it. So that almost seems like an avenue of like, if even just knowing like, oh, I want, to achieve this thing in, 5 years from now. Well, then even if you don't get to that, maybe you get halfway there. So I think that could be a very motivational thing, is kind of like, hey, what's your vision for 10 years from now? This probably all exists. There are probably apps that do this, but we don't know about them. So maybe no one's really cracked the whatever the analogy I'm trying to think of.
Cracked the code.
Literally. Yeah, sure. Right.
But I do see a lot of promise in the data monetization of blockchain, where like Brave, for instance, that browser, being able to reward you when you want to be, or it does something where it empowers the user to have control over their data. So then they have the option to choose whether or not they want ads sent to them. And if they do choose, then they can get rewarded for watching those ads. I don't know. I really like that idea, and I see a lot of promise in it. But the downside is that I don't know how sustainable that is, or if it's going to create a network where you're able to make enough money where it's actually like somewhat impactful from the data usage that you're doing.
Yeah, I don't really know enough about BAT and how that whole system works with Brave to know really about much about it.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just gonna do some more research, a lot more research into it, and see what comes of it.
Cool.
I definitely want to reach out to you if I do have set plan of attack to maybe we could get together and
I
try to
always
develop
I like
an app.
talking about that stuff, especially incentives in app design, and I don't I now you talking about this makes me want to look into Brave and BAT more. Advertising, internet advertising is a really kind of interesting thing. We went from the world of consumer packaged goods companies where TV advertising and billboards was the way to go, because it was like, okay, we're going to make this mass market product, Wonder Bread, whatever, for everybody in the 60s, like, okay, we're going to put it on, all these ads and TV ads and billboards and whatever to get that, repeat recognition of it. And now someone's in the grocery store and buys it. That's like a mass CPG, approach that now we're shifted to more of these like the Instagram style ads where it's more targeted direct to consumer brands where they're seeking out the people who want the really good kitchen knives, or like a super nice belt, like a fancy expensive belt.
Yep.
And it's really shifting how advertising's working. Then you throw in these things of like people not being able to be tracked across sites or across apps, and it's like the whole thing is just being flipped on its head. And then some people are saying, well, that's anti-competitive for Google and Apple to get rid of these tracking things, because then only they can do the tracking. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe that's the case. But it's interesting because this is all kind of up in the air right now. We're seeing people being really influenced by all these algorithms, and it sounds like it's an interesting area to think about for sure.
Yeah, I mean, economically speaking, like how you're making the comparison of the Wonder Bread to things that are more direct consumer. I feel like we're going through this shift, economically speaking, where it's more trying to create a marketplace that is about self-empowerment and personal development. And I just think that that's this idea that I'm pitching to you would be the next step to that, to get to like a higher level in self-empowerment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea too of like, the way Instagram works, sometimes it'll recommend a product and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like that's something I actually really want. And, how can we move more in that direction? Because, there are certain things where it's like, I want to buy something, like I want to buy a new pair of sunglasses and I don't want to really look around that hard, but I want to find like the perfect pair of sunglasses for me that are like super well made that I can, it's like on Reddit, buy it for life. It's like if you want to buy something like super high quality, it's going to last you a long time. You can go on there and, find out what it is or what different options are. But, that I think that could be a really interesting, like when you're talking about buying things or getting ads for things that are really relevant to you. It's like hopefully it also can move in the direction of higher quality and like more sustainably produced long-term things rather than like the more disposable like fast fashion quick like buy this thing and it's like a
clickbait kind of thing.
Yeah, just like something that you don't get a lot of use out of, I guess. I don't know, I'm being pretty abstract about it, but I'm trying to think of a good example.
Something as far as like behavior change goes. There's like, let's take smoking for instance. Like it's easier to get that quick hit from a cigarette and like fix that craving that you're having if you're addicted to cigarettes than it is to see the long-term health benefits that you would be if you just stopped altogether. But those long-term health benefits or the quick short-term pleasure ends up outweighing more so than not the long-term health benefits, and that's why it's so hard to quit cigarettes.
Sure. Or Instagram
or Instagram,
or think about the vision for where you want your life instead of just staying on the treadmill and and just going with whatever comes.
So the way around that I see is like, how can you give people that short-term hit while also incentivizing long-term,
like a positive hit, of some kind.
Like if you could
I'm
somehow
think about this now. This is interesting of like how I've thought about the idea of like what's an app, like even just the most abstract way, what's an app that people would want to open all the time that's not Facebook or Instagram, that would build some kind of positive habit. But it sounds like the introspection is like that's a good avenue. Yeah,
like imagine if you could reward someone every time they go to work out. Like, yeah, it's bettering them, but they don't see those benefits until long term.
Right. And there have been, I mean, I forget the name, like Sweatcoin and like all these different apps that, you know, feed into that and give you some kind of prize based on that, but then it's like easily gameable. And so it's interesting, you know,
with the health tracking, like you could put on your cat and have.
Yeah. I like the health. I mean, the health tracking stuff is so interesting to me. And I think that's going to be a really interesting area going forward. I mean, with being able to do different types of blood tests in real time. And like I wear a continuous glucose monitor, but I'm not diabetic. It's like normally a prescription device for diabetics, but it's like, it's so crazy to have that feedback now of like seeing what my glucose level is in real time and, you know, knowing how well I'm doing as far as just like avoiding like a lot of sugar and like having these crazy sugar crashes or getting better sleep. And it'll be great, you know, when you can monitor things like, well, I don't know what can really be monitored in real time next. I mean, glucose, there's a huge market for it, but, you know, other types of blood tests, you know, have varying degrees of work involved, obviously. Oops. I should have put it on Do Not Disturb. But anyway, that's it's something I'm really interested in seeing too, is how can the biofeedback of it all be incorporated into something, you know, making you more introspective. Like I've become super aware now of my sleep. I track my sleep really carefully, like you know, blood oxygen level, heart rate variability, heart rate, you know, blood glucose level, like, you know, time spent in REM sleep. And, you know, when you put all that together.
That's all from the glucose monitor?
No, those are from different devices.
Oh, okay.
Like I wear an Apple Watch that has the blood oxygen sensor. I wear something called an Aura ring, which is measures HRV and heart rate, skin temperature, and then just like it has an accelerometer in it to just measure movement. But like mashing that all up together, it's really interesting to see like, wow, you know, having that information about a night, like seeing the difference between, oh, I ate a bunch of food before bed and then went to sleep, and it's like, oh, my heart rate was high all night, my blood glucose level was bouncing up and down, and you know, you can feel it the next day. But now it's nice to know, oh, well, you know, I can see that, you know, if everything was flat, like blood glucose was flat, my heart rate was low, I wake up with a high HRV, my skin temperature was low, you know, not very high. It's like, oh, now I kind of know that I'm healthier, but it helps build that momentum of, okay, now I'm going to, you know, try to live the next day better. And so I think that that'll be, you know, those types of mechanisms might be a way to help people get motivated, I guess. You know, I mean, the rings, like on an Apple Watch, there are like these 3 activity rings that it encourages you to close them every day by, you know, standing, exercising, and just kind of moving. But you know, it seems to be very good at habit building for people like who they'll lose a bunch of weight because of it, just because they want to fill the stupid rings. But like they're not stupid rings. You get it going on a streak and you're like, oh, I can't break my, you know, 6-day streak now, or my people get year-long streaks of doing it every day. So I think in that, you know, yeah, you could put it on your dog, but like, you know, you're only hurting yourself then.
That's the thing too, like if you add money into the equation, then it's just more easily like people just tamper with it. Or
yeah, it's a weird incentive.
People
like, have you seen the billboard out here for donate plasma and get $700 a month? And it's kind of like
CSL.
I don't know. I mean, I just saw it. I saw it when I was waiting outside of the building here, and it's like I've seen it around town, and it's kind of interesting to me because it's like, well, yeah, people do need plasma, but it's an interesting incentive to, you know, pay people for their plasma, and like, where does that end? Where, you know, you know, in other countries, people sell their kidneys, you know, like you only need one kidney to really live. So should you be able to sell your kidney? And
do you think it's like a too powerful of an incentive?
I don't know. I just think it's kind of it's a kind of a weird and interesting incentive. I don't know that it's necessarily too powerful, but it's just an interesting thing to me. It's like, oh, you're paying someone for like, you know, this
doing good
bodily like the stuff your body produces. Or like I've given blood before, but like that's more just because I'm like, oh, this is something I can do to help people. It's not like I'm getting paid to. I think they give you like, well, they give you snacks afterwards, but like I don't know what else, but it's just interesting to me to see that. And it's like thinking about you know, some of those monetary incentives when it comes to like, you know, well, I don't know. Incentives are just fascinating to me in general, but I saw that billboard and I was thinking about it. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ethically, I don't know where it lies, like how I feel about it. But in terms of like trying to motivate people, like some people, that's what might actually motivate them to get up and go for a run is to just pay them.
I guess.
And it's like universal value. Like just money is a universal value. What, as opposed to like every time you get up, I'm gonna give you a granola bar. Well, what if you don't like a granola bar? You know,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
everyone can use money.
sure. Yeah.
So I don't know, just interesting idea.
Yeah.
Who knows what'll come of it?
Okay.
But I'll keep thinking about it. And would that be something you would be able to do?
I mean, I think it would be it would need to be a more like fully formed idea. Like, what's the scope of it? You know, starting really simple and then kind of building out from there. I mean, the whole decentralized aspect adds a lot of complexity and would make it into, you know, something kind of totally different and a lot more complicated. Where, you know, if you're trying to just start off with like, what's the basic user interface? Like that could be that, you know, that's like one way to start. Is just like, okay, you know, creating the user interface and making something that's interactive, even if it's not really connected to anything, you know. So
do you have any
kind of a starting point?
Do you have any background in AI?
No.
Or like machine learning kind of stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't done that.
Would that be something you would want to learn?
I don't know. I probably not at this point. I don't know. I'm a little interested in it, but without having a specific application of it, I think it's I haven't really looked into it. You know, a lot of my software development I've done, it's been like learning enough to build something that I want to build, rather than like, oh, I'm going to learn about this new area and then apply it to something. If that makes sense.
Cool. Well,
all right. How long have we been going here? Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time.
Second part's been 50 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I think the last one was about an hour.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So, yeah, let's wrap it up.
All right. Sounds good. That's it.
We're done.
Cool. Thanks.
So there you have it. Thanks again for tuning in to Bindlism, a philosophy to self-sufficient lifestyle. Be sure to explore other episodes of Bindlism on our Spotify and Apple podcast. You can find more BOHO HOBO stuff on Instagram and Twitter at BOHO_HOBO_, as well as on our Facebook page at BOHO HOBO Lifestyle. It'd also be dope if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Our YouTube channel has more episodes from Bindlism in video form, along with other random shenanigans that we're up to. We're constantly filming new experiences, so it's one way you guys can stay up to date with us in our journey. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Until next time, peace.